While whole armies were being ground into mincemeat, Europe's most powerful citadels stood aside, holding a VIP pass to bypass the war. This is the cast of the untouchable sites. Why do structures designed to take the brunt of the assault shine like new today, without a single combat dent in their biographies? The official story about military fortifications is merely a set piece for the naive. The facts hit hard. The more powerful the site, the less it actually fought. Königstein, Spandau, Chocca, these giants with 3-meter armor simply switched to neutrality mode or surrendered at the first call during the height of world slaughters. This was a systemic survival protocol for the elites. Both the attackers and the defenders knew these points were holy ground. Citadels were projected not as shields for the people, but as ultra-reliable safes. While the cannon fodder rotted in the trenches, behind these walls they preserved what was valued higher than millions of lives: treasuries, archives, and dangerous knowledge. These weren't military outposts, they were asset vaults, while the rest of the world turned to ash. What forced Hitler and Napoleon to stand submissively still before the cliffs of Saxony? We will crack open the archives of Königstein and find out why they bored a 150-meter well if no one ever intended to storm the fortress. 42-meter walls atop a sheer mountain, 400 years of history, and 0 assaults. This is Königstein, a military site that, through 4 centuries of total war in Europe, never received a single scratch from an enemy cannonball. While Saxony was being torn to pieces, this citadel stood in deathly silence. Why did the armadas of Napoleon and Frederick the Great obediently freeze at the foot of this rock, as if they had struck an invisible barrier? Official history bleats about impregnability, but the facts scream otherwise. In 1756, the Prussian army entered Saxony like a knife through butter. Saxon regiments capitulated right at the base of Königstein. And what of the fortress? It simply declared neutrality. In the heat of war, a site that had swallowed decades of budgets hoisted the white flag of a pre-arranged deal. This wasn't defense, it was conservation mode. In 1756, 1813, and even 1945, they didn't haul shells here. They hauled gold, the Green Vault collections, and Raphael's masterpieces. Königstein functioned like an armored safety deposit box. In its casemates lay 120 million gold marks, while soldiers outside starved to death. The walls protected not the country, but the material base of the elites, which was meant to survive regardless of who the master was. And the attackers knew this, obediently bypassing the vault. But why would a safe for paintings need a 152-meter deep well hammered into the basalt for 6 consecutive years? If no one intended to besiege the fortress, for whom were they extracting water from such an abyss? The answer lies not in the thirst of soldiers, but in a giant wine reservoir holding 250,000 liters, 6 years of hammering through basalt for a well as deep as a 50-story building. Boring 152 meters into the rock by hand represents an astronomical cost. Why turn a fortress into a mining operation if no one ever intended to storm it? The excuse of preparing for a siege is a cheap lie that falls apart the moment you peer into the cellars. While historians mumble about heroic garrisons, the numbers scream of luxury. In 1725, a wine reservoir with a capacity of 238,600 liters was constructed in Königstein. This is not infrastructure for soldiers, it is for the autonomous survival of the country's top brass. The giant well and a sea of wine were necessary for the government of Saxony to wait out wars for years in 5-star bunker mode. Königstein is a state in reserve. While borders were being redrawn on the battlefields, the elite awaited the finale in a zone of absolute invulnerability. It was an elite arc where, under the cover of cannons, the gold fund was preserved while the common people paid with their lives for the ambitions of kings. But Königstein guarded more than just wine. In its chambers, people whose knowledge could collapse economies were isolated. What do the creator of porcelain and an anarchist theorist have in common? They became deposits in this bank. And in Berlin, this scenario was repeated even more ruthlessly. In Königstein, gold and people were stored on different floors, and to the owners of the fortress, they were the exact same type of asset. Over 400 years, More than 1,000 prisoners were preserved here, but you won't find petty thieves among them. Those immured within these walls were people whose ideas or knowledge were more dangerous than an enemy army at the gates. Officially, it is called a state prison, but in fact it was a safe for intellectual property. They held the alchemist Johann Böttger here until at gunpoint he derived the formula for Saxon porcelain, the white gold that enriched the treasury. They left Mikhail Bakunin, the father of anarchism, and August Bebel to rot here. The logic is simple. If knowledge cannot be bought, it must be isolated. The difference between a gold ingot in the basement and a genius in a cell was merely which floor they occupied. Königstein functioned as an operational filter. Everything valuable went inside, and everything dangerous went under lock and key. While the whole world believed the fortress was protecting borders, it was actually holding the keys to economic and political dominance within itself. It was a laboratory of coercion hidden behind the facade of an impregnable cliff. But if Königstein was merely a safe for valuables, the Spandau Citadel in Berlin went further. There, behind walls 3.5 meters thick, they hid not just gold, but a technology of mass death that the world would only see decades later. What forced the commandant to surrender to Napoleon without firing a single shot? Why build walls 3.5 meters thick if you plan to throw up a white flag at the sight of the very first enemy soldier? Spandau is an engineering masterpiece capable of withstanding a hellish bombardment. Yet, in 1806, it surrendered to Napoleon without a single shot. Cowardice? No, it was part of a cynical protocol that would repeat itself with surgical precision a century and a half later. Historians bleat about panic, but on May 1, 1945, the commandant of Spandau once again capitulated before the storming even began. While Berlin was being turned to ash, the citadel stood unscathed. Why? Inside the Julius Tower, Soviet units found not gold, but the archives of Schröder's laboratory, the formulas for tabun and sarin. Behind the facade of an architectural monument, the Nazis hid the technology of mass death. The fortress surrendered without a fight, not out of weakness, but to preserve its contents. It wasn't a fort, it was an incubator for chemical weapons, passed from hand to hand like a relay baton. The victors didn't need ruins, they needed ready-made recipes for murder, and for that reason, the walls of Spandau were declared untouchable. But why did the Nazis choose an ancient fort instead of a secret bunker? The secret lies not in the cannons, but in the climatic miracle of medieval walls. It turns out that 16th century masters didn't build against cannonballs, but against time itself. What exactly did they preserve within these walls? Do you think 3.5-meter walls are only for protection against projectiles? You're wrong. The masters of the 16th century created a biological stasis dome. Inside the Julius Tower, an ideal microclimate is maintained year-round, without a single device. This isn't just fortification, it's a giant stone refrigerator working against the laws of time. While Hitler was building concrete bunkers, his chemists were settling into Renaissance halls. Damp basements are unfit for the synthesis of tabun and sarin, but the walls of Spandau create the ultimate temperature buffer. In 1936, right under the nose of Olympic Berlin, 300 scientists were quietly brewing nerve agent death. The old castle became the perfect screen. Who would suspect a laboratory inside a museum? The walls provided absolute isolation. What happened inside could not be heard outside, in both a literal and a political sense. Prussian gold or Nazi gas, the contents changed, but the Julius Tower remained holy ground for any regime, preserving that which cannot be trusted to the ordinary world. But if Spandau was a state project, why would a private tycoon need to invest millions into a castle with 40 secret passages? In Poland stands an object that the army simply wiped off the maps in 1952. What intelligence layer was a common tobacco king masking? Why sink 5 million gold marks into a heap of stones? In 1910, tobacco tycoon Gutschow hired not a decorator, but a military architect to transform Chocha Castle into a spy's anthill. That amount of money could build entire factories. Yet the tycoon invested it into 40 secret passages, most of which have not been found to this day. Officially, it is a romantic residence, but the facts scream of espionage. Bodo Ebhardt, Germany's top expert in fortification, designed the site so that a person could vanish from the library and reappear in another wing in seconds. This wasn't a rich man's whim, it was operational infrastructure. It is no coincidence that during the war, the Abwehr's encryption school set up shop here. Chocza is a communications hub disguised as an antiquity. In 1952, the Polish army erased the site from all national maps. The architectural monument turned into a black hole. When a state spends resources on such silencing, it means only one thing: the site's functions remained the same, only the masters changed. Why was there an early century industrial refrigeration unit in the dungeons of a private castle? Was the Tobacco King cooling wine or biosamples that couldn't be shown even to Hitler? The answer leads to Austria, to a treasury that even the Nazis were afraid to crack open. Why did the Ottoman army, after conquering half of Europe, bypass a single cliff in Austria in terror? Fürstenstein has never survived a single assault. The walls are intact, the cannons remained silent, and the collections kept growing while the world around burned. This wasn't luck. It was a psychological barrier that proved more powerful than any projectiles. Officially, it was a citadel for border protection. In reality, it was the armored bank of the Esterhazy family. While wars raged across Europe, they honed the art of camouflage through dread. They displayed stuffed crocodiles and giant bones in the halls, creating an aura of dangerous devilry. This was the first system of contactless defense, convincing the enemy that inside was something better left undisturbed. And it worked. In 1938, the Nazis, who were looting the aristocracy, somehow forgot about Fürstenstein. The residence of the wealthiest family remained untouched at the height of the confiscations. When looters in uniforms bypass such a treasury, it isn't an accident. The owners possessed a lever of pressure stronger than tank divisions. The main secret is the two-key system, without which the treasury cannot be opened. In the 17th century, someone created protection against a threat coming not from the outside, but from within. Where is the second key today? The answer lies in the strange behavior of the victors who, instead of looting, began guarding. A fortress is more than just a safe for gold, it is an incubator for stolen technologies. If you have invented something capable of collapsing the global market, your address will not be a patent office, but a casemate. For centuries, citadels practiced state raiding. Geniuses were preserved in stone until they yielded the manufacturing secrets that enriched the crown. A striking example is Johann Böttger. In the 1700s, he was locked in Königstein with the demand that he create gold. When alchemy failed, he was forced for years to derive the formula for Chinese porcelain, the white gold of that era. In those damp dungeons, the secret was found. Saxony became fabulously wealthy, and Böttger simply died in obscurity, never having regained his freedom. This was a systemic approach. Deserter fortresses served as laboratories of coercion. If knowledge provided a monopoly, it was not meant to belong to the world, only to the owner of the walls. While the common people fought for flags, technologies were beaten out of men in the silence of citadels, allowing the elites to maintain power for centuries. But why across the entire world, from Russia to America, were these laboratories built according to the exact same blueprints? We call them star forts. But what if this isn't an architectural style, but a unified standard of a global franchise erected upon the ruins of something much more ancient? From the Philippines to Russia, thousands of fortresses stand across the globe, built according to a single blueprint. These are the star forts. Historians insist they were a response to the development of cannons. But why are their forms mathematically identical on different continents? It appears this is not an architectural style, but a unified standard of a global management system, built on the ruins of something far older. The scale is staggering. In the 17th and 18th centuries, someone implemented a project of planetary proportions. It features perfect fractal geometry and incredibly complex hydrotechnical systems. We are told these were built by men with pickaxes, yet the precision of the lines matches to the millimeter in different parts of the world. These stars suspiciously resemble not defensive hubs, but technical facilities, energy storage units, or territorial management processors. They were not destroyed. During bloody wars, artillery bypassed the stars. It was a network structure. Every fort was a communication node, a warehouse, and a bank. He who owned the network owned the world, regardless of which flag hung over the town hall. It was a security franchise for those who stand above nations. But what became of the power units of these stars? Modern government quarters and financial centers often stand exactly where the rays of stone giants once reached. We have moved from physical walls to digital ones, but the principles have not changed. Who occupies the primary nodes of the planet today? The era of great fortresses has not ended. It has simply become invisible. The same principles of autonomous survival that we saw in Königstein have migrated to cloud servers and doomsday bunkers. We continue to pay for defense while the elites build walls that protect them, not from an external enemy, but from us. Modern data centers and vaults are the direct descendants of the Julius Tower. The Svalbard Global Seed Vault or the server farms in Swiss forts share those same meter-thick walls, controlled microclimates, and legal extraterritoriality. These are the safes for the assets of a new age, information and genetic code. Fortress 2.0 has no need for cannons. It is protected by its status as critical infrastructure. While the world is frightened by threats, a closed world with its own stockpiles is forming behind these walls. It is the same global franchise, network nodes where resources remain untouchable. Only the medium of value has changed, from gold ingots to digital ledgers. The history of Königstein is not a story about stones, but an instruction manual for identifying the safety zones of the chosen few. We will always be urged to unite at the walls, but in a true fortress, no space was ever intended for those who built it. True defense lies in knowing the rules of the game that has been played with us for thousands of years. We have finished our journey through the deserter fortresses, and the main conclusion is obvious. These stones are not silent witnesses, but active operators of history. Königstein, Spandau, and Chocha proved that the global security system was built not to protect nations, but to preserve the resources of the elite during moments when the world plunged into chaos. The 10 nodes of our matrix have formed a picture of a global contract. Fortification is the highest form of legal and physical escapism. While the chronicles feed us tales of heroism, the architecture of star forts whispers the truth. The owners of these sites knew that every war ends in negotiations, and it is best to conduct them while sitting on untouched reserves of gold and technology. Today's digital bastions are merely a new iteration of the old scheme. For centuries, we were taught to admire the might of these walls so that we wouldn't ask, why, in moments of catastrophe, did these guns remain silent? They were guarding the future for those who called the shots, while the rest of the world paid the bills with its blood. History is not the text in a textbook. It is what is immured in the foundation. To understand the logic of untouchable walls is to see the true structure of the world. We are closing this chapter, but we continue to watch as the old scenarios are rewritten in the language of code. Truth always takes the form of a fortress that we are forbidden to storm.